Shiitake is an interesting form of mushroom. It's different than the button mushrooms that most of us are used to in the grocery store, either fresh or canned, and it's different than the dried mushrooms that you may have experienced. And if you're lucky enough to have been one of those people who've come across some mushrooms that have been gathered out in the field, these are going to be different from those also. They are all fungus, however. The way we're going to prepare these today is using them fresh, the way that they were brought to us. Now, you can see that when we start with, we have a lot of different sizes. And the larger ones are still edible, but they're going to be a little bit tougher, so that you're going to want to make sure that you saute them or cook them in some form. In general, the mushrooms have a stronger flavor when they're cooked than they do when they're raw. And you can see that the little tiny ones here, barely opening their caps, are just ready to use. And I've used them fresh in a salad, which is one of the good alternatives. Now, you can also use these in a lot of different stir-fried recipes, and that's sort of what we're going to be doing today. I'm going to heat the skillet just a little bit. Now, because this is a stir-fried recipe, you'd be able to change the ingredients as you wish. I'm going to add about a tablespoon of vegetable oil to our skillet and get that started at just a little bit warming up. I'm going to add 1 clove of garlic that we've crushed. And the skillet will be sizzling soon, I'm sure. And then I've sliced 1 onion. Now, this will eventually be broken into rings as it heats up. Now, this I want to saute just until the onion gets a little bit tender, which would be about 3 minutes. So we'll let it go ahead and sit there for a minute. Shiitake itself is an interesting word. It means mushroom of the fallen tree in Japanese, which I think is very interesting because that's where the mushrooms are growing. Now, if you look, I've taken the mushrooms, and you can see here that we have quite a bit of dirt on them. And this, just like all mushrooms, you don't want to actually submerge when you clean it because it's going to absorb a lot of the water and then be mushy and will be a lower quality. So you brush these off with a paper towel or a damp cloth. And then because these mushrooms have very woody stems, you can either break off the bottom part, which will be the woody section, or you can cut it, which is what I did on most of these. You can see that I just took a knife and found where the softer part was and cut off that hard part. Now, you do want to save those stems, as you can see I've done here. You'd go ahead and make sure that they're clean, but you don't want to throw them away. Cook them in a broth, either chicken broth or a beef broth, which is really nice because they already have sort of a beefy taste. Then strain it. So this would then make a mushroom broth or a vegetable broth that you could use with other foods. We don't want to waste anything on these, particularly if you've had to buy them, because they're going to be a little bit more expensive than some of the other mushrooms that we're used to. Okay, let's stir these around a little bit and break them up. They're trying to stay stacked together instead of spread out the way I'd like. Now, normally we would let these saute for about 3 minutes until they get a little bit softer, but to save a little bit of time, I'm going to break them into rings a bit, and then we're going to go ahead and add our other ingredients. Okay, to this we're going to add about a 10-ounce package of peas, or a little bit over a cup, that have been frozen or thawed from the frozen state. 8 ounces of the mushrooms. Now, you can see that I have some that were larger that I cut into smaller pieces, and the smaller ones that I just left whole. Now, also to this, we're going to add about a teaspoon of fresh lemon juice and a teaspoon of salt. Now, you could cut back on the salt. In fact, the original recipe that I saw called for about a teaspoon and a quarter of salt, so I cut back on a little. Depending on what your needs are, you can cut it back more or completely leave it out. And this then will saute for about 8 minutes until the mushrooms are tender and everything is heated through. So we'll go ahead and put a lid on that, and we'll come back in just a second when that time period is over. Once the mushrooms are tender, which you can test with a fork, or you can go ahead and taste one of them, then you want to stir in 2 tomatoes that you've cut into medium wedges, and then just going to heat this till it's heated through. You don't want the tomatoes to get watery because we've used up most of the liquid trying to dry this all out. Now, this will have somewhat of a meaty flavor, and it will be very good with other cuts of very lean meat or with other vegetarian dishes because it does have such a meaty flavor. Once the tomatoes are heated through, we go ahead and serve them up. This is a wonderful made in Oklahoma and grown in Oklahoma dish because almost all of the things in here, or all of the things in here, could be produced in Oklahoma with just about the exception of the lemon juice. Now, other forms of shiitake are also available. You could saute the mushrooms in a little bit of oil and add a little sherry or soy sauce to them and have a wonderful oriental dish that you could serve with steak. Another form that you can buy shiitake in is an already prepared steak sauce. And these are also kinds of things that you may want to experiment with in your own kitchen and see if you can create some of your own. For Oklahoma Gardening, this is Barbara Brown.